There is a terrifying pattern in the financial history that a lot of people don't see it coming. And let me explain you why. Every 10, 15, or 20 years, we see some kind of financial downtrend in overall global markets where we lose more than 50% of the overall value of any index. This was seen in the dot-com bubble in 2000. Then second, we saw 2008. In 2020, we saw similar kind of situation or a microcosm of such situation in COVID. And now we are standing in 2026 where a lot of investors are fearful about something else or a black swan event that may have the similar impact. An entire generation of investors has not seen an bigger financial crisis similar to 2008. Even I have not experienced such scenarios. But when I look back into it, I am very intrigued to learn about it and predict the next black swan event. You can say that in 2020 we saw somewhat similar situation, but in 2020 COVID situation, we didn't saw a 50-60% crash. And also we didn't saw a systematic failure in financial systems, because in 2000 and 2008, we saw a systematic buildup of such crisis. And according to me, the war, the AI bubble, and in one video I have explained how Japanese yen trade is putting such kind of pressure on the systematic things throughout the global economic systems, which may constitute to one of the factors for such collapse or crisis. Let me ask a simple question. If you are under 35 years of age, have you seen a massive crash of more than 50% in the traditional markets in your lifetime or in your generation of investing? At least I have not. We came very close in COVID to experience such kind of scenarios, but we still didn't saw a systematic failure. There was a study around fund managers. For example, fund managers who has survived the 2008 crash were more prepared in 2020 rather than fund investors who firstly experienced those kind of scenarios. They were a bit unprepared. How to make yourself understand the generational gap that we are facing right now? A lot of the information is missed or diluted over the generation or memory gap in the market cycles. From my perspective, we have three generations of people that comes into the market. The first generation are the one who has actually survived the crisis. They are cautious people. They remember the past failures. They save more and leverage less and does proper risk management. And they always try to warn the younger generation to not make the same mistake that they did in past. The second generations are the most confused ones. As the market recovers from the crisis, the second generation is in the dilemma of thinking whether it will sustain or should we listen to the old generation where they are more cautious about it. But still, most of the investors go forward and take risk in such of markets because the trend is going upward. These investors have heard the stories from the old generation about the crisis and have prepared themselves to some extent to protect themselves. There comes the third generations, which are us. Throughout our investment journey, we have only seen the bull markets and have never seen 50-60% of crash in our whole lifetime. 2008 for us is like a historic test or historic era where we don't know what actually happened and what was the actual impact of such kind of situation in the global economics. And right now we are seeing that a lot of young generations who's coming up and coming into the markets are taking a lot of risks because they have been only investing in the uptrend of the markets. And this repeating cycles are not something new in the market. A lot of researchers like Minsky and Gartner has already drawn Minsky moments and Gartner hype cycle, where they clearly explains that we always see a euphoric moment in the market where the risk is the highest and the potential of failure is way more. During these cycles, we see very high inflated prices of assets, which are in actual are not generating enough profits and are not actually that much valuable. A lot of investors are into AI, inflating the valuations of a lot of these AI companies. But if you look at their balance sheets, they are not profitable at all or very less profit. So I'm talking about such kind of scenarios where people have invested into assets which are overly valued. The Gartner hype cycle always ends with a phase where we see a collapse in all the asset prices. Maybe you have observed this kind of cycles in Bitcoin price charts where we see 4 years downtrend and 4 years uptrend. This is somewhat replicating Gartner's hype cycle, where we see depths of despair and then we see the euphoric phase similar to what we saw in 2025. It's just that Bitcoin as a younger asset have very shorter life cycles, whereas bigger markets or bigger and traditional markets have larger cycles of 15 or even going up to 20 years. So we cannot predict the timeline of bigger markets. They can vary from 10, 15 to 20 years. There is a great analogy given by the CEO of one of the top financial institution in USA that for 10-15 years when we cut trees in the forest floor is always covered with the debris of the fallen trees. Now let's assume that one hiker goes to the forest and flicks a cigarette into the debris. What we see next is the forest full of fire. So in such situation, will you blame the guy who flicked the cigarette or blame the guys who was cutting the trees for 10-15 years? Maybe you can have the answer for that. But as a single person, we cannot predict the overall cascading effects of a systematic failure. Similar to how the forest got on fire, we cannot predict the source of the fire. We always have to look at the smaller failures that are occurring into the financial markets and global economics right now. In Buddhism, there is a saying that the endless cycle of suffering is mainly caused due to your attachment and your ignorance. So, if you're attached to your ideologies of financial markets, then you need to change it. And if you're ignoring the history, maybe you should start looking at it. So, what do you do with this information is completely depend on you. Option 1, some people just ignore it. Option 2, you start preparing for it. Because in the financial market, the money always flows from the unprepared to the prepared. And hope you are standing on the prepared end. I'm not saying that the crisis is coming in 2026 or 2027. I'm just saying that the ingredients are already there. The forest floor is covered with debris. Someone somewhere will flick a cigarette. See you later.